Excellent. Would you believe that's the first time I've ever started to record on a Zoom call? Brilliant. So yeah, Martin Craig here. Good to have everybody with us tonight. Photography Basics 2. It's a 4-session course that we're doing with Brentford as part of the Brentwood Photography Group. And I'm going to whiz through a number of slides that I shared as well last time around. Probably just to give context for the new people joining us that weren't able to review the video, but also as a reminder. And I think this is a really good statement to kick the session off with. And it's from Jen Vogel, that runs an organization called Able Voices, which is for special needs, later teens and young adults. Photography is so much more than pressing a button, and it's just about people obviously doing photography, but building friendships and having fun with one another. And I love the way how Jen takes that PH of photography, friends, and fun through the spelling there. But that's what we're about, right? Brentwood Photography Group is a group that loves to have fun. We take the craft of photography seriously, but to a point, right? We all want to grow and learn. There's nearly 200 people or members, active members in the group of various different levels, right? But the main purpose of the group is to have fellowship, community, grow in the craft. We meet in Brentwood on Franklin Road. The first Tuesday of every month, we do a bucket load of stuff. And 2 meetings that are coming up that I want to make you aware of off the bat here in November. The first one is from Dave Hatchie, who's been in the group a number of years now, traveled the world, 40, 50 countries, and he's going to be focusing on black and white and how to get real detail out of that black and white using Adobe Lightroom. And then we'll have that's an in-person meeting, and then we have a Zoom meeting coming up the week after on minimalism by Denise Silva. And she's going to be focusing on simplifying images right down to the essentials. And I touched on that last week as well. So the presentations will help you take what we learned during this course and take it to the next level. So if you're not a member of the group, feel free to go to the website, sign up. It's only $40, great value. A little bit about me again, for those that are new here tonight. I started film back in the film days in the 80s. I've had a business, an on-the-side photography business, which I established in 2008. Became a member of BPG in 2017. Happily married to my beautiful wife for 37 years. 3 grown kids, they're all married, making great life choices, which is wonderful. And I've got 2 amazing grandkids who are still trying to work out making life choices, right? So there's a number of people that have signed up for this class, and when you break down the sort of skill level, you all sort of did like a little survey when you registered. 13% absolute beginner, 16 camera phone. You know, the majority is you want to take it to the next level, and that's where we're going to be focused for the most part. We've done absolute beginner. We've kind of done camera phone. That's what we did last week, and so now we're getting into that 3rd stage of you've got some skill and we want to take it to the next level. And so we talked left side, right side of our brain kind of thing last time, looking at the creative and the technical and what makes that, how the technical things like shutter speed, aperture, and ISO, which we really are the 3 pillars of exposure, help us build that creative element, composition, static motion, etc. And we're going to be focusing on more of those things later on. But we also talked about how light is really important in what we do. And the word photography literally means drawing with light, coming from 2 Greek words. So we focused on composition. And again, just to recap, we looked at rule of thirds. We looked at simplifying an image, zooming in, cropping that, and then expanding it to make a sort of a really nice art piece. We talked about negative space and distractions. We talked about leading lines and framing, negative space again, and sort of how things can lean backwards, lean forwards, just to kind of create a tension depending on the mood you're trying to create. Symmetry, And I've got thirds on the horizontals there as well, and something called rule of odds. I said that the human eye or the human brain likes things in odds, so 3s and 5s and 7s. And we summarize by saying composition is key. Right? There's a ton of rules. Learning rules is important because when we know the rules and we sort of appreciate what they do, then we can almost forget them and know how to break the rules. But ultimately, composition is key, coming up with a pleasing image. But it makes the assumption that the light intensity and quality is good, and it also helps if the scene is interesting. What do we mean by interesting? It's something that is unique or shown in a unique way. And then I challenge you to do some exercises, and a number of people did. I got some emails from people with some wonderful photos. But you know what? It really doesn't matter what we photograph. It's about getting out there and practicing, and of course, having fun with what we do. And printing it. I stressed that last time. I said, go out, buy yourself a $50 printer. Maybe $50 a bit cheap. But go out and buy a relatively inexpensive printer. If you want any advice on the kind of printer to buy, I can make some great recommendations for you, which are not that expensive, won't be expensive to run either. But printing out your images is so important in learning to become a better photographer, because you see so many things on printed media. Again, Bert and I were talking earlier. I think, Bert, you mentioned this to me, that you can have a digital image, right? We take photos, and for the most part, they sit on digital matter, and we occasionally view them on the screen. And you know what? They pretty much look the same, no matter how many times we look at something. But when printed, it's different depending on where it is, on the light, on the framing, etc. So print it out, put it in a frame, get it on your wall, and admire it and really enjoy. To that point, I got a new printer, and I printed out. Oh, is this going to work? Is it going to focus? It's all blurred. Is that? Oh, don't you hate it when you have that zoom thing on? I'll come back to that. Right. I've got the blur thing, so it looks for people's faces and then blurs everything else out of it. So we'll come back to that one. But anyway, I printed out on a brand new printer, which is sat next to me, and it's the love of my life right now, apart from my grandkids and wife. And I'm having a great deal of fun just printing stuff out. All right, session 2, taking it off auto. Full transparency, I had that taking it off auto just a few minutes ago, and I can't remember who it was now, but somebody emailed me saying they just signed up and thanking me for sending the registration, and then they said, will I be taking it kind of to the next level, because they know how to do photography, they put the camera on auto, and they want to take it off auto. So I thought, what a great phrase, taking it off auto. So that's literally what we're going to be doing today. There's a few things, again, I just want to bring some level setting here. Of course, in order to take it off auto and do things like control shutter speed and aperture and things, which are all coming, we have to know some basics. Okay, so let's just go back to think of this as graduating from a phone camera. We've got phone cameras, we all carry them today probably. They're fantastic. They are great image making devices. They're convenient. However, there's limited control. So taking it off auto is very difficult with a phone. You can do it in part, but not super easy. Good image quality, but generally you need good light. Okay, and I showed last week how you can take how you can take an image that was taken on a phone camera, and you get something like I've shown there. And actually, I've just printed that out, and that's going up on the wall soon. It looks fabulous printed. Deep, contrasty black and white, and it's really moody, but it's wonderful. And then we move into graduating into point and shoot cameras. They're still convenient. They will slip in your pocket, a little bit more bulky than a phone camera, but you've got full manual controls on it. The image quality is good to excellent. However, they can be sort of noisy. If you don't know what that means, don't worry about it. But ultimately you can take an image in low light and it's grainy. Let me just put it that way. And we call that grain noise in photography terms. Limited zoom capability generally. Now, having said some of those things, there's always exceptions to the rule. These things run from $100 to thousands of dollars. And obviously, if you're getting the ones made by Leica that are over $1,000, $5,000, they're amazing. No noise, but generally speaking, you don't get the zoom capability with all of them. And there's an example image that I took in Germany with at the time, I think it was a $300 camera. Today, you can get it used for $50 maybe, but it took great images, and I use it on business trips and for traveling. It was fantastic for that. And then we have digital SLRs. They're bulky, but you've got full manual control. They're absolutely excellent image quality makers, and they handle low light very well for the most part. Lots of flexibility, and that really by that I mean you've got a lot of different choices for lenses. So that's where a digital SLR and a point and shoot camera will change. They both allow you to do take it off auto, full manual controls, but when you've got the flexibility of changing lenses, then that really opens up the kind of photography you can do. So building on what I've just said about lenses and an introduction to lens types and focal lengths, different scenes that we might be taking, whether that's landscape or macro photography or portrait photography, they can best be captured using the right lens. Now, I stress right because actually there's 4 or 5 different cameras there. Honestly, you could do landscape with all of them, but some you want to get a relatively narrow field of view, some you get a more wide angle view, but you can still do landscape. You could even do portrait photography. You just, with a zoom lens, you just have to walk back a lot in order to make sure the subject fits into the frame. So you can use all of these lenses for any kind of scene. It's just that some help out more than others, and then ultimately help the image, the resulting image. So here's a big whopping image on the end of this camera. This person's holding. So it's as I was gathering information, but I thought it was a great example. So for anybody that is just getting started with photography and you want to minimize shake and vibration, I'm 62 years old now, and I'm realizing I'm not quite as steady in my hand as I used to be. But if you put which I'm showing here, you put your elbow right into your side and you push it in, you put your hand under the camera, and then you look through it. Now you've got several sort of holding points, right? And that means it's going to be a lot more stable. If you have a big lens like that, and some people hold a camera this way and they turn the lens. I've got no stability of the camera. So put your arm underneath, hold it like that, and that will really help with minimizing movement of the camera when you're taking a picture. So a quick guide to typical focal lengths and their uses. So between 12 millimeters and 35 millimeters. So that's the focal length. So the maximum focal length of a 12 to 35 millimeter lens is 35 millimeters. The minimum focal length is 12 millimeters. Generally referred to as a wide angle lens, and that's good for things like landscape photography. Focal length between 35 and 70, very good for travel photography, street photography, some portraiture. The maximum focal length there is 70. Up to 135 millimeters, that starts to get good for photography because you can get quite a bit in the frame, but also you can zoom in as well. Also good for portraiture. And then a focal length up to 135 and higher. We often refer to that as a telephoto lens. Great for wildlife, getting in close where you can't get close to a subject like a deer or something because they're too skittish and would run off. Or if it's a bear, you don't want to get close to them. And so you want the capability to zoom. And so zooming is part of a focal length. So 135 millimeters and higher is good for that. And it's important that we have a grasp of this. as it helps us with setting the right shutter speed depending on the subject that we're taking. I think that'll start to make more sense as we move forward here. So let's think about now of extending our creativity. We focused on composition. Now we're going to focus on shutter speed, and shutter speed lets us create and control whether the image is going to be static or it's going to have some motion to it. And I'm going to go through some examples now of images that are very in focus, nothing's blurry on it, and then some will look as though that it is blurred, and that's done for effect. Thinking about taking it off auto. So I know you're on the call. I think I saw your name come in. So whoever it was on the call that mentioned that to me tonight, great job, because you said take it off auto, and I thought, I should show the dial here. So I added this. This is a Canon camera. Zoom in here, and this is a Nikon. I think Sony does the same as Nikon, but on a Canon, you'll see TV. So here's the green button. When that's lined up with this dash, you're on auto mode. By the way, that's absolutely fine, guys. You want to stick your camera on auto and go out, take photos, because that's all you want to do. That's absolutely fine. But it can be advantageous to move it round onto T to control the speed, the shutter speed, and then AV to get the aperture, and we're going to do that next week. That allows us control over the creativity. If we keep it on auto, you're relying on the camera to do that for you. And so T for Canon cameras, S for Sony and Nikon, and that's for shutter speed. In a nutshell, if you have a fast shutter speed, you're going to freeze the motion. If you have a slow shutter speed, you've got blurry motion. So slower speed, blurry motion, and a typical kind of speed might be 2 seconds. That would create something blurred if something's motion. So if you take a photo and you've got your shutter speed at 2 seconds, there or thereabouts, and something's moving at a reasonable pace, let's say somebody walking or running, then they're going to appear blurred. If you want to freeze the motion, you go for something much higher, 1/2000th of a second, and that will cause most things to appear as though it's very stationary. And this gives you some indication. So if you take a picture of somebody that's walking or maybe jogging at 1/2 a second, they appear a bit blurred. 60th of a second, they've started to not look that blurred, but just maybe a little bit. And then at 500ths of a second, they're stationary. So I tried to experiment with my iPhone using the Lightroom Photo app, which I'm going to talk about later on. And I have a dripping tap, faucet. I can never say that word in American. Faucet, I don't know. But anyway, calling it a tap. It's dripping. I got it at a nice steady speed. And I set my camera to 1/800th of a second. And you can see I have to take about 10 photos, guys, right? But I captured it twice. And you can see it's a pretty crummy image, right? So it's a phone using just the available light, which wasn't great. But hopefully you can see the droplet there, and they see multiple droplets. So at 800th of a second, we freeze the motion. 60th of a second, and I hope you can see, we've got sort of just a line here of it coming in. So one is blurry motion, one is frozen motion. That'll be a good thing for you to try. Just put your tap so it's dripping a little bit. Get your phone. You have to find a way to set the shutter speed, and you can't do that if you're using just the app on an iPhone or an Android device. I don't believe. So you need a device or another app to do that, and the Lightroom app will do it. So just check out Lightroom mobile app. It's free after the course, not now, and download it, play around with it. Okay, so when first starting out in photography, one of the most asked questions is, what is the best shutter speed to use? And there's no such thing as the best shutter speed. There isn't one single shutter speed, right? Because it depends on what you're taking a photo of. However, there are some rules or guidelines that will help us. There is a general rule of thumb that to avoid any camera shake, and so you just saw the way I was demonstrating holding a camera, assuming you're holding a camera relatively securely and you don't have any natural shake, then to avoid any camera shake, just when hand holding, you take the shutter, you set the shutter speed to be equal to the length for the lens's focal length. And that's why I had a slide here talking about focal lengths and what they were for the different kind of lenses, right? So if we have a lens fitted and we've got it set all the way, zoomed all the way out at 70 millimeters, that means the focal length is 70 millimeters. Therefore, I'm going to set my shutter speed as a minimum general rule of thumb to a 70th of a second or there or thereabouts, maybe a 60th, maybe 100. And that will get you something that will freeze the action so long as the subject is not moving too quickly. And there's some examples. So focal length of 50 millimeters, 50th of a second, 200 millimeters, 200th of a second, and 500 millimeters, 500th of a second, etc. And so now we want to get into, right, answering that question, what's the best shutter speed? It depends on the use. So if we're trying to capture birds in flight, 1/2000 or 2,000ths of a second. 1,000th of a second, good for photographing sport and action. And jump through this. 500th of a second for kids playing. 200th, 250th of a second for people moving. All the way down to 1 second or more for creating blurs of smoothing out water. We'll get that kind of white milky effect that you see in photographs of waterfalls. 30 seconds, you start to capture night sky, and 10 minutes and beyond, you can really get into seeing star trails and things like that. So up to 1/60th of a second, most people recommend handheld, and then beyond that or lower than that, you want a tripod or other kind of support. You know, when I'm out with my camera, if I'm doing a long exposure of 30 seconds at the seaside, when I go over to England, I like to take photos of the pier with the water moving, and I'll put it on a wall or a bean bag or my camera bag, and I'll just rest it there. I'll press the shutter, and it now it's taking in light for 30 seconds, but because it's supported either on a tripod or a wall or something, it's not moving, and so you don't get vibration. So that's why you need things like tripods. And when I will send out, I'll put this in the link as well to the email follow-up. I got this information from this website here, and there's more supplemental reading you might want to do. They're very, very helpful in terms of setting a shutter speed depending on what you're taking a photo of. So let's look at some examples because that brings it to life. So that chart said 1/2000th of a second used to capture birds in flight, and this is a bluebird that I took in Georgia, if I remember rightly. We were in a cabin there, and this bluebird kept flying into the window, but it wasn't just flying in and flying, it was trying to get something. Now, there was nothing, we cleared all the bread off the windowsill, we cleared the countertops, and it kept trying to come through this window. So what I did, I went outside, I washed the window, because every time it flapped into it, right, it deposited something, and so I made it all nice and clean. I went inside, so this I'm inside the cabin, and it's outside. I'm looking through what was a nice clean pane of glass now, and I've got my camera on 1/1600th of a second, and I've got a relatively low aperture. Again, we'll get back to that next week because I've got a blurred background there, and I've just about frozen this thing, right? This side is fairly sharp. Here it's a little bit blurry, but that's okay. It's a bird flapping its wings, and I think it's okay sometimes to have that because it shows a little bit of motion. It shows it's real, right? It shows it's not overly photoshopped. And then here's another one at 500th of a second. This is a chipping sparrow, and it's about to. I put some little nuts that you can't see behind here. This was a log that I got, stuck it in the ground, put some nuts on it, and all the birds came, and I got this one. And you know, I wasn't trying to necessarily get this. It's just what I had set at the time, but I thought it illustrated quite well. Again, it's an okay image. It shows it's flying in, but generally speaking, you try and get the wings to be nice and stationary and sharp, like this one over here. A thousandth of a second is good for photographing sports or action. I actually really like this image. I'm not saying it's a world-class image, but this is done as a thousandth of a second. This is when my son, who's now in his 30s, but when he was in high school, this is not my boy actually, it's somebody on the team, when he was playing soccer, football, I should say. My dad would tell me off for saying soccer. So he's playing soccer, and you can see the ball is stationary. But I love this. I love how he's just kind of saying, really? You think you can beat me, get past me? This guy over here is like, what is this? Sorry, I'm getting. Most of the parents there didn't have any idea of football, and he's kind of, what's going on here? Why is nobody throwing it? All right, so I just find it kind of humorous, this one. When a photo tells a story like this, for me, you know, it's a successful photograph. Here we can see the photo. The ball is a little bit blurred. I did it at 250th of a second. Most of the subjects here are fairly static, but the ball is just a little bit blurred. And I'm doing this to illustrate, you know, one that's kind of accurate and then one not so good. 250th of a second, people and animals moving, jumping, and dancing. So this is Hannah, my daughter, with my grandson, looking at the little tortoise called Fred, who actually could be called Frida, because it is a female. They find that out after they took this thing to the vet for a checkup when it was about 30 years old, only to find out it was a girl, and they've been calling it Fred all its life. But anyway, this is interesting though as well. If you remember last week, I talked about getting the sides of buildings vertical and how important it is to hold our camera so it's not leaning forward, leaning back, or sideways, right? On this one, I'm crouched down and I'm actually looking up at Hannah, and you notice it's slightly elongated, and the body just seems elongated as you go. I can tell you her head is not alien shaped like that, right? So that's another thing to watch out for. Now you could fix that in Photoshop, or Photoshop afterwards, but you know, let's not do that. Let's get it right. So just remember, when you're taking photos, especially of people, and you know, want to get the aspect of the legs and the heads all accurate, we try and keep the front of the camera, the plane, not leaning forward or leaning back, so parallel plane. Nice little Bambi deer in focus. I wanted to stress here, these rules are obviously just guidelines. Again, I don't know whether it's coming through, but this is blurred because there's some motion going on. And so be careful with some of these things. I would actually recommend, when you've got animals that are moving like this and frolicking about, you probably should go to 1/500th of a second. But certainly it works for kids. Coming in, really slowing it down now, 20th of a second and less, this smooth, silky water. So this was done in 2018 at the old, where is it, in Manchester, the old Stone Fort Park, State Park there in Manchester, Michigan. I'd only just joined the group and we had an outing there, and you know, I was really wanting to try and get this kind of milky effect, and it's kind of there. You get it here because the water's coming over so fast, but then when you get it into the river, it's slowing down. This is not milky white smooth like I was hoping for. Black areas in the trees, so I've kind of underexposed it a little bit, but I've still got somewhat of the motion. We had another outing in just earlier this year. You can see the difference now. I've captured, so it's 40th of a second. So actually this one's not as slow, but I think it's a better composition. I've got more of the angle. It's nice that this log is leaning up against it. But again, I don't have a smooth, white, silky milky color to the river as it's flowing along. This one, I think, much better. Down at, what is it, 30 seconds, nice and smooth. This is all smooth, so you don't see the ripples. It's not white, right? But this is, it doesn't have to be white, it just has to be nice and smooth, kind of glass-like. So one of the things I'm trying to illustrate here as well is, just the benefit of practicing. I've really improved since 2018 to 2024 with this kind of photography, with portraits and things like that. I was pretty good at before, and that's why I had the business to do portraiture work. And that was nice. It brought in some nice dollars, and allowed me to buy really nice lenses and cameras and things. But when you're doing it for fun and you're doing landscapes, yeah, it's different, right? And so I had to grow in this. So I just an illustration of how the practice has paid off over the years. And around 30 seconds is where you start to capture. It's good for capturing night skies. This is one of Bert's images that he took a few years ago. Really, you can see sort of how the stars moving is accentuated. And I think what he did also with this, because it's a long exposure, I think he actually ran around the house and lit it up with a flashlight, which is how he's able to get. This is completely black. There's no natural lighting on the house, but I think he got in with a flashlight, and as he's moving, he shines it around, and you don't see that moving because just because of the way it sort of all blends in together. But really nice technique there.
We actually lit it with a car that was about a half a mile away.
That's right. It was a car. Yeah, I knew it was lit somehow, which is really cool. Yeah, and a couple of images here. This one was a really fortunate one, as I was just doing a long exposure of the farm behind us, and I got this lightning strike. So really nice examples there. And again, getting these sort of, I talked about the smooth water that you get. You also get these smooth skies in the same way. Again, this was a dark sky. It would probably look black, and yet it's amazing how much ambient light there is there when you set your camera to kind of get all those, basically sucking in all the photons that our eyes can't see, and they hit the sensor and they stay there, and it's kind of just absorbing them until the shutter closes. All right. I'll pause for a second there. Are there any questions that of anything I've just gone over? People want clarification before I go into a demo here. Okay, we'll come back to questions at the end as well if you want to. And as I mentioned earlier, feel free to email me. So here's an image that's called faking motion blur, right? So there's a few people on the call who I know are more advanced and appreciate maybe some of the techniques that I could teach with regards to Photoshop. So not that I'm the world's leading expert in Photoshop at all, but I do know a few things. I've used it for a while. And one of the things that you can do use Photoshop quite effectively for, is creating sort of fake motion. And so you see here, this is a heron down at Hollinsdale Farm, flapping its big giant wings. Remember, a bird in flight, 0.02 of a second. 0.05 of a second is absolutely fine for a heron because its wings are moving so slowly. They're not fluttering at 10,000 miles an hour like the little sparrows and bluebirds are. And so again, F11. Again, I'm getting into aperture here. So this is an aperture setting. F11 would generally mean, depending on exactly what you've got going on, but would generally mean the subject and the background and things in front of the subject towards the camera are going to be in focus, and that's what I'm illustrating here. And it's an okay image, right? It's okay. I've captured what I wanted to capture. If I was doing this today, I would have actually a slower shutter speed, and as the bird is flying, remember these things are not whizzing by, they fly fairly slowly. You position your camera, and as you're tracking the bird, you press the shutter, and it will then, the bird, because you're following it, stays in focus, but the background blurs. And I know you demonstrated one of these just with your camera phone down in Franklin, which was quite effective as well. So, this is the same kind of effect, but I'm faking it, right? So let's go into Photoshop. And let's hope I can remember what to do. And let's hope, as in the case of most demos, it doesn't crash or fail. Right, so here's the image, right? You see I've just got one layer, nothing up my sleeve. First thing I'm going to do is create a copy of that background layer, as it's called. And to do that, you press Control and J. Hopefully that makes sense if you're used to Photoshop. And again, if you're not a Photoshop user, it doesn't matter. What you can get here is really the principles of the steps, I hope. And we can always explore Photoshop on another occasion together if you want to. But I've just created a background layer, or a copy of that layer, for two reasons. One, I don't want to screw up my layer and or edit it and spoil it and then you know, lose a nice image kind of thing. So you kind of create this background layer, but also it means I can make some changes to this layer, and I've still got the original layer to go back to if I need to do something else. So on this layer, I'm just going to illustrate to you getting the blur initially. I'm going to go to Filter, Blur, and something called Motion Blur. You see how that already has created this blur, and you can play around with the blur, so not as blurry. Don't worry about the bird for now, although it is important, and a lot of blur, a lot of motion blur, right? Well, I think somewhere around there looks quite good. Again, forget the bird. It looks though like the motion. It looks like I've got motion in the trees and motion in the water, and so I'm going to say okay for that now. But the problem is I've got this blurred bird, and I want a in focus bird there, right? So let me undo that, and let me cut out the bird, because what I want to do is create a blur, but I don't want to blur the bird. That's difficult to say 3 times. So I don't want the bird to be blurred, right? So I'm going to cut it out. Let me do that. Let's again. I'm going to do object selection. I'm going to draw around the bird. And if you notice, if I zoom in here, it's done a pretty good job as Photoshop of automatically detecting what it thinks is the subject or the object. And it's using some, you know, machine learning, artificial intelligence type thing to try and define that. If I zoom in, you can see it's missed a little bit of the head. I know it misses a little bit in here, missed the clothes and things, but you know what? We're not going to worry about it too much. We're just going to do that, and then we'll come back and sort this out a little bit later. And then, oops, we just move around, just make sure there's nothing to move around. I'm just holding the space bar and then dragging the mouse, click and hold to drag around. But you can see these what are called marching ants, these dashed lines. It's done a pretty good job of selecting the outside of that bird. And so I'm going to make a copy of this. Actually, it's a pseudo copy. I'm actually just going to click the masking tool down here. I could have extracted that bird off that layer. I'm just going to mask it for now. And so there's my bird. You can, as I mentioned, got a little bit of the water in there. It's missed the head off, but I'm going to bring that stuff back in a little bit. Okay, so there's my bird. Let me take this off. Let me again create another copy of that layer. And now I'm going to cut out the bird completely. So go here. Because remember, when I blurred that background, if I blur it without the bird in there, with the bird in there rather, it blurred the bird, and maybe I should show you, but hopefully you can appreciate what it was doing. That would have been a blurry bird. If I'd have then put the bird back on top of that, which I've kind of cut out, it wouldn't have looked right. So I'm going to fill this space with water, and to do that, I've just outlined that area. If I right mouse click on it now, and then I do content away fill, and there you see up here, it's a preview. Okay, and I've got rid of the bird from there. Now I can put the bird back in. So there's my bird in on this separate line. So I'm turning this eye symbol on and off. Okay. So this, what this has done now is created a separate layer for me with just the filled area. So I need to blend these two layers together. You can do that by pressing Control E or right mouse click and do merge layers. So now what I've got here, turn that off. Now you can see, just looking at this layer, I've basically removed the bird and I can put the bird back in, and it looks fine at that zoomed in level. So now let's blur this layer. For those who are more advanced here, I should be creating a smart filter, which then allows me to change things and that kind of thing. But again, we may do that on another occasion. For now, let's just apply some motion blur. And it remembers what I did last time, so 190. Let's stick at that. Now if I add the bird back on there, and there's my motion blur. Zoom in, I'll show you how to bring back the bits that we lost. I go back to the layer with the it created a mask. I probably should have explained that. All I've done here on this layer is create a mask. If I press the Shift key and click this, then what it's doing is turning the mask off completely. So let me keep the mask on here. And I am going to now paint on the mask. So you make sure the square is highlighted on the mask. You hit the B key for the brush. And with white selected, I want to bring back some of the area that was missed off. So let me put this other layer back on. And I'm just going to go around with a black brush, I said. I have my opacity low here, so turn that opacity up. Okay. Sorry, a white brush. And I'm painting back now. You see, I'm painting more of the edging, so I've got more of the head here. There was a bit, yeah, that thing. Right, but I've gone too far deliberately. I've started to bring back some of the non-blurred water. So if I make the brush white again, brush around carefully. And, you know, again, you need a steady hand using the mouse. A lot of people use a tablet. But you just go around, and basically what I'm doing is I'm just smoothing some of the edges. I could spend a lot of time. There's a little bit mist here. Paint it in, and then just refine it. Yeah, we knew there was something between the legs here, so let's get rid of that. And make the brush bigger by pressing the square bracket keys. Again, this is not a training course in how to use Photoshop to do this. It's just an illustration as to how some of the things you can get into once you start learning more photography. Because today, learning photography is more than just knowing how to use a camera. It's about using the associated software. Almost every image you see printed out or online today, it's going to have gone through some kind of digital post-processing, right? And again, everybody at this point almost becomes overly defensive, and they start talking about Ansel Adams, as I'm going to. Most of us on the call will have heard of Ansel Adams, known for his brilliant black and white, high contrast images. of landscapes, and he highly processed those images, but he did it all in what's called the dark room. Now we have and that is using chemicals and all that kind of thing. But he highly manipulated his images. Really smart guy. Today we do that very same thing in a computer. And so people have always manipulated their images. Today we just use a computer to do it. So there we go. I could really go in a lot more to really refine the edges, make it a lot better. But you get the gist. I've got a fairly decent cut out there. And then I don't like some of these blue bits up here. So I'm going to create a new layer and I'm going to use something called the stamping tool. I'm going to select an area here, and then I'm going to just paste it over here, or brush it over here to get rid of some of those green bushes that I've got. Don't like. Maybe get rid of these, and then I'm going to get rid of the blues. And so we talked last week about distracting elements. To me, that bit of blue with the brown was kind of distracting. It may not have been for you, but we can get rid of it that way. And now, if I go back to what I had here, I've achieved a nice fake motion blur. I've just got sort of this nice color toning to it. And to do that, I will go to the color lookup, and I know the one I want to use is to make it warm, a crisp warm, and there it is. And that's how to create a fake motion blur using Photoshop. So if you don't get it right in camera, which we should try to in this kind of thing, we can always create a very similar effect using some of these tools for us. And it's one of the reasons why again, if you're relatively new, if you're you're just getting going with photography and you're trying to take it to the next level, it's one of the reasons why I'm mentioning here several times that you install the Adobe software for your phone, because it will, the Lightroom tool, it will let you start to play around with some of the controls, and once you do that and you see the effect of a change of shutter speed on the final image that's produced, it's all part of the learning process. And so it really does help you learn about photography. It's more than just a toy or an app on a phone to create, nice images. It's about the art and learning. So download the free version. Some benefits of Lightroom Mobile over the camera phone app. The Lightroom Mobile doesn't add or apply any algorithms and processing. The new iPhone 16, which I'll be getting later this month, it's a great phone. It has a great camera capabilities, has some good lenses, but the algorithms are now applying to it are more extreme than they used to be, and they're for my liking, they're too sharp, they're too contrasty. Now again, you can go into the app and tone that down, but straight out of camera, it applies too much stuff to it. Whereas if you use Lightroom Mobile, it doesn't do anything. You now, as the owner of this craft, right, you can apply the effects as you see fit. So it doesn't apply over shortening, no added saturation. You can edit as you want to. What I would, as an example for you to sort of practice shutter speed, get a pendulum swinging, right? So just get a piece of string, put a weight on the end of it, suspend it somehow, and get it swinging, and then get your camera and take photos. If you just want to play with the app in the camera, experiment, maybe you'll get some kind of blurriness, but again, I would really recommend you get a Lightroom Mobile and you'll be able to find a way to change the shutter speed or control the shutter speed, and you should see this kind of effect. You can see how you've got a blur and then stationary and so on. Okay. And then print your images. I can't stress that enough. It's a really great way to learn what you've been doing. So I think with that, that is it for tonight. Any questions from anybody? I know last time, sorry, some people put it in the chat panel. Okay.
Hey, Martin, can I make a comment?
Absolutely.
For people with camera phones, if you want to experiment with shutter speed, there's an app called Slow Shutter, a free app, which is a fun thing to kind of play with. It enables you to kind of get a lot of, you can get a lot of these effects. And I've used Slow Shutter driving down the road and taking pictures of cars coming at me. And it's really interesting to see some of the interesting effects. So Slow Shutter is an interesting little camera phone app that enables you a lot more flexibility to play with shutter speed.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks, Bert.
Mm-hmm.
And you got a compliment from Leandra. She said nice work, Bert. I'm assuming she meant for your star photo.
Well, thank you, Leandra.
We'll begin link to the recordings. Yes, I will, Sandy. I'll send a link out. Yep, got it. Any more questions, anybody? You can put them in the chat if you want. Go on, Anne. You said right at the beginning you've always got questions. I know you've got a question here.
Yeah, I don't use Photoshop, so I was looking at your editing enviously. I use Lightroom, and I was wondering that effect of blurring. I know how to do some masking of the separate masks, one for the subject, one for the background, that kind of masking, and I could maybe play with that.
Yeah, yes, you can't get the sort of motion blur. You can get a fade. You can blur, but you don't get the sort of
the motion. Yeah. And the picture I took in Franklin was with an SLR, and I was actually practicing panning. So.
Right. I thought that was your iPhone. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you, though. Thank you so much for tonight. It's very helpful.
Yeah, good. All right, everyone. If there's no more questions, good. Feel free to send me an email, though, if you do think of something. And next week, we'll focus on aperture setting. Thank you. Good night.
Thanks, Martin.
You bet. Take care.
Good night.